Welcome to True Echo, the channel where real grit meets unbelievable turns. Here we bring you the most powerful, dramatic, and inspirational true-style stories, tales of resilience, betrayal, and redemption that echo long after the final scene. Get ready because today's story will challenge everything you thought you knew about loyalty, justice, and who society often overlooks. I will defend her. The words sliced through the hushed courtroom like a thunderclap. Every head turned toward the aisle, eyes widening at the sight of a middle-aged black janitor still holding a dripping mop, his work gloves damp, boots scuffed, and blue jumpsuit stained with bleach marks. Jacob Lane stood tall, unmoving, his voice steady with quiet authority. The courtroom, moments ago filled with the rustling of papers and murmurs, was now frozen. Then, laughter. First a scoff, then a burst of chuckles from the press gallery. "You lost, janitor?" someone called out, voice thick with mockery. "Sit down before you slip," another sneered. But Jacob didn't budge. His eyes locked on the bench where Judge Walter Harris sat, a weathered man known for his no-nonsense approach to high-stakes corporate cases. This trial wasn't ordinary. It was a federal case accusing one of the most powerful tech CEOs in the country, Vivien Storm, of orchestrating a massive fraud scheme that could destroy everything she'd built. Now, the chair beside Vivien, meant for her lead attorney, was conspicuously empty. Her legal counsel had mysteriously vanished the morning of the trial. "Sir, you need to leave the floor immediately," the bailiff barked, stepping forward. But Jacob's voice rang out again, louder, firmer. "I said I'll defend her." Judge Harris adjusted his glasses, eyeing the man before him. "Name?" "Jacob Lane, Your Honor." The judge leaned forward. "Mr. Lane, are you the licensed attorney of record for Miss Storm?" Jacob turned to the defense table. Vivien Storm, regal in her navy suit, stared back in shock. For years, she'd passed this man in the halls of Storm Tech without truly noticing him. Now here he was, standing in a courtroom full of lawyers, reporters, and cameras, ready to put everything on the line for her. You're just the janitor," she whispered. "Yes, Miss Storm," Jacob replied calmly, setting his mop aside. "But I know what they're trying to do to you. And I won't let them." Vivien Storm's eyes flicked toward the judge, uncertainty battling pride. She was used to control, power, precision. But today she was alone, her legal counsel having vanished without even a call. She hadn't authorized this janitor, Jacob Lane, to speak, yet something in his eyes disarmed her, an unshakable calm. A man who had nothing to gain, yet everything to risk. The courtroom buzzed again with laughter until Judge Harris held up a hand, silencing the room. "Miss Storm," he said, voice even, "you are without legal representation. According to federal trial protocol, you may allow another party to speak on your behalf, though it's not common. Do you object to Mr. Lane continuing?" Vivien looked to her left, at the empty seat that had once been filled by her high-powered attorney. Then back at the man she barely knew. For all her wealth and influence, she had never felt so abandoned. And now the janitor she'd ignored for 3 years was offering to stand for her in a room where even allies had turned away. Her voice trembled slightly. "Let him speak." A murmur swept the room like a gust of wind. The prosecution team stiffened, and at the center of it stood Marshall Kent, celebrity prosecutor, Harvard graduate, undefeated in every corporate takedown in the last 5 years. His smirk returned. "Your Honor," Marshall said with mock courtesy, "this is highly irregular. We're allowing the cleaning crew to litigate a federal case now." Judge Harris gave him a glance. "He has standing if the defendant permits it. And unless you'd like to argue with federal statute, sit down, Mr. Kent." Marshall's jaw tightened as he returned to his table. Jacob stepped forward, removing his gloves and placing a thick binder on the defense table. Color-coded tabs jutted from the edges. Every page worn from use. This wasn't a gimmick. He had prepared for this. He looked up, breath even. On March 7th, he began, Storm Tech was accused of digitally forging contract amendments with Ravenark Capital. The prosecution alleges these forged documents originated from Miss Storm's IP address in New York. But I have here, he tapped the binder, clear technical metadata proving otherwise. The digital footprint leads back not to New York but to Zurich. Specifically, a server operated by Alter Holdings, Storm Tech's direct competitor. A hush fell so fast it felt like a vacuum. Reporters leaned forward. Marshall blinked. Vivien slowly turned toward Jacob, her brow furrowed. "And I'm not asking anyone to take my word for it," Jacob continued. "This binder contains a technical report from an independent cybersecurity analyst. The IP in question is a static address, registered to a Zurich office connected with Alter Holdings. This wasn't an accident. It was planted. Marshall sprang from his chair, unable to contain his fury. Objection. Your Honor, this is circumstantial, speculative. Sit down, Mr. Kent, Judge Harris interrupted, not unkindly. We'll let the evidence speak. Vivien looked visibly shaken now, not from fear but revelation. The name Alter Holdings rang sharply in her mind. A firm that had been circling her company like vultures for months, waiting for a crack to become a canyon. Jacob continued, turning a page in his binder. There's more. The language used in the amendment doesn't match Stormtech's legal templates. It bears syntax common to European financial contracts, specifically those drafted under Swiss law. I've compared over 30 internal documents. This isn't Stormtech's voice. It's someone else's. Vivien felt goosebumps rise on her skin. And the person responsible, Jacob added, is someone close. Someone with access. I believe that person is Paul Temple, Miss Storm's executive assistant. The crowd gasped. Vivien's lips parted in disbelief. Paul? Jacob gave a solemn nod. I've been documenting anomalies for months. Discarded drafts, misplaced memos, suspicious access logs. I didn't understand them at first. But after finding the contract pages in the trash, I started watching more closely. He paused, letting the courtroom absorb the weight of what he had said. Vivien turned pale. Paul had been at her side since her first IPO. She had trusted him completely. And yet, Judge Harris raised a hand again. This is serious testimony. Mr. Lane, if this is true, we'll need verification. I'm ordering the court's IT department to immediately assess the metadata and server trace you've provided. We'll recess for 1 hour. Gavel strike. Court adjourned. As the crowd began to buzz again, Jacob quietly stepped back. He didn't look for praise. He didn't puff his chest. He simply gathered his gloves and mop. He had done what was right. What justice demanded. Vivien rose slowly. Her heels clicked softly against the tile as she approached him. You, she said gently, you really believe I'm innocent? Jacob looked at her, a quiet fire in his eyes. I don't just believe it, he said. I know it. And I'll prove it no matter what it takes. The corridor outside the courtroom hummed with electricity, reporters scrambling, lawyers murmuring, cameras rolling. But at the far end, where the fluorescent lights buzzed softly above weathered benches, Jacob Lane sat alone. His binder lay open beside him, its contents rearranged again and again in his mind. The last hour had been a whirlwind, but Jacob knew the eye of the storm still lay ahead. Footsteps clicked on the marble floor. Vivien Storm approached, her expression no longer icy and distant, but curious, even vulnerable. You're not just some janitor, she said, more to herself than to him. Jacob gave a small smile. No, Miss Storm. I used to be a second-year law student at NYU. I had to drop out when my wife got sick. Cancer. It was quick. By the time I realized how serious it was already too late. I left school and never went back. Vivien's lips parted. She didn't know what to say. The image of Jacob, the mop, the gloves, the faded uniform, clashed with the man she saw now. Calm, deliberate, intelligent. And now, she asked softly. Now, Jacob replied, I'm a single dad to an 11-year-old girl who thinks the world is still fair. I want to keep it that way for her. Vivien folded her arms, eyes studying him. You said Paul Temple betrayed me. I did. And you have proof? Jacob pulled from his jacket a small, worn stack of handwritten notes. Tidy, meticulous, full of dates and details. He held them out to her. Vivien hesitated, then took them. These are observations I made during my cleaning hours, Jacob explained. Documents discarded in odd places. Access logs left open. Paul's patterns changing. Suspicious midnight calls when he thought no one was watching. Vivien's eyes scanned the pages. The writing was clean, the notes exact. There was nothing amateur about any of it. She looked up, brows drawn. You gathered all this, on your own time? Jacob nodded. Stormtech matters to me, Miss Storm. You may not have seen me, but I've seen you. You work late. You never pass blame. I've heard you stand up for interns no one else notices. So when this lawsuit dropped and when Paul vanished, I knew. Something wasn't right. Vivien's throat tightened. For the first time in months, someone was standing in front of her not because of what she could offer, but because of what they believed. She swallowed. So what now? Jacob stood, voice quiet but firm. Now we wait for the court's forensic team to verify the metadata. But if I'm right, and I am, then the entire case falls apart. Vivien studied him. You know they won't go down without a fight. Kent's not just coming for me. Now he's coming for you. Jacob's gaze didn't waver. Let him. A bailiff appeared at the hallway's end. Court reconvenes in 5. Vivien turned to head back toward the chamber, then paused. Jacob. He looked at her. If we survive this, Stormtech needs someone like you. Not just as a janitor. A flicker of surprise passed across Jacob's face. But he didn't reply. He didn't have to. Inside, the courtroom had changed. More press. More whispers. The energy was heavier now. Jacob took his seat again beside Vivien. Across the room, Marshal Kent looked ready for war. Judge Harris entered. The courtroom rose, then sat. Mr. Lane, the judge began, we've reviewed your materials. The court's independent IT forensic analyst has confirmed the IP address trace and server origination match your claim. The document metadata shows the amendment was digitally signed from a server in Zurich, belonging to a consultancy linked to Alter Holdings. Not from Stormtech. Gasp. Kent shot to his feet. Your Honor, this proves nothing. A VPN, an overseas associate. This could all be manufactured. Sit down, Mr. Kent, Harris said coolly. And unless you have direct evidence that rebuts this claim, I suggest we allow Mr. Lane to proceed. Marshall glared across the aisle at Jacob, the edges of his perfect composure beginning to fray. Jacob stood again. His voice firm, measured. I'm not here to grandstand, he said. But there's something else the court should know. During my cleaning rounds, I discovered a discarded draft of the amendment weeks before the case even began. And I retrieved it, not from Miss Storm's office, but from the shred bin outside Paul Temple's workspace. He held up the page, preserved carefully in a plastic sleeve. It matches the final signed version. Same content, same formatting. Only difference? No signature. Because it was still in draft phase. Vivien leaned in, stunned. Marshall exploded. This is unverified. Inadmissible. A janitor collecting documents from the trash can't constitute a legal chain of custody. Judge Harris raised a brow. And yet here we are, with more evidence from the janitor than from the prosecution. Laughter rippled through the room. Kent seethed. But Jacob wasn't finished. He reached into his folder and produced a final document. I also recovered a burner phone from Mr. Temple's locked drawer after he fled Stormtech. That phone contained messages between him and a man identified as Martin Aldut, CEO of Alter Holdings. Judge Harris lifted a hand. We will need to verify those messages and confirm Mr. Lane's authority in accessing that office. Jacob nodded. I already submitted them to investigative journalist Reggie Holmes, who verified sender IDs and IP locations. The phone was left unsecured, and as a member of the cleaning staff, I had access to that drawer. It wasn't locked, just neglected. I took nothing. I reported everything. Judge Harris turned to Marshall. Mr. Kent? Marshall was silent. His jaw clenched. His eyes locked with Jacob's, no longer with arrogance, but with something else. Fear. Marshall Kent's silence said everything. The courtroom, once a haven for his signature bravado, was now a crucible, and Jacob Lane, the man he had laughed off as a lowly janitor, was turning up the heat. Judge Harris adjusted his glasses and leaned back slightly. Mr. Lane, he said, his tone contemplative, you've presented compelling preliminary evidence. Before this court accepts your claims as admissible, I'll allow Mr. Kent a final opportunity to challenge their credibility. Then we'll proceed. Marshall finally stood, every ounce of his posture screaming restraint. But his eyes, they burned. He stepped slowly toward the witness box as if stalking prey. Mr. Lane, he began smoothly, you've spoken at length about truth, justice, sacrifice. Very moving. But I'd like to know, can someone with your past truly be trusted? Jacob didn't flinch. He had expected this. I understand the game, Mr. Kent, he replied calmly. You want to shift the focus from facts to me. Marshall smirked. No, Mr. Lane. I want to expose the truth behind your so-called selfless act. Let's start with this. You attended NYU Law, but you never graduated. Why? The room leaned in. Jacob inhaled slowly, then stood tall. Because my wife, Monica, was diagnosed with stage 4 ovarian cancer during my second year. We had no family support. No insurance strong enough. It was me or no one. I dropped out to care for her full-time until she passed. A silence deeper than any before filled the courtroom. Even the reporters stopped typing. Jacob continued, voice trembling slightly but unwavering. After that, it was just me and my daughter. I took the first job I could find to keep a roof over her head. That job was at Stormtech. Cleaning floors. Emptying trash bins. Scrubbing toilets. That job kept my daughter fed and in school. He looked Marshall in the eye. Does that disqualify me from knowing the law? From understanding injustice? Or from standing up for what's right? Marshall faltered for a half second, just long enough for the crowd to notice. Touching story, he sneered finally, but irrelevant. This is federal court, not a therapy session. You're not licensed to practice law. These are federal charges. You're a janitor playing dress-up. Jacob's reply was swift. And yet here I am. Presenting evidence you didn't find. Revealing inconsistencies your team ignored. With no degree, no firm, no billable hours, just truth. The courtroom burst into soft applause before Judge Harris raised a hand. Order, please. Vivien turned to Jacob, her face unreadable, until he glanced over and saw her eyes glistening. A single nod of quiet respect passed between them. Judge Harris tapped his gavel. We will take a recess. The court's forensic team will now examine Mr. Lane's final submission, the contents of the burner phone, and authenticate communications between Mr. Temple and Martin Lyles of Alter Holdings. Court resumes in 90 minutes. As the courtroom emptied, Marshall stalked off without a word. Vivien stood next to Jacob in the aisle. She hesitated, then whispered, I don't know how you're doing this, but, thank you. Jacob gave a small, exhausted smile. For the first time in years. I feel like I'm doing what I was meant to do. Outside, the press erupted. Mr. Lane. Do you believe the court will side with you? Are you accusing Alter Holdings of corporate sabotage? Did you steal evidence? Jacob didn't stop for any of them. He ducked into a quiet hallway, pulled out his phone, and dialed. Reggie Holmes answered. You've stirred up a hornet's nest, my friend. Did you get the full encryption data from the burner phone? Jacob asked. Yep. I traced the origin IP of the emails. Zurich confirmed. Cross-reference to Alter Holdings' internal server. But there's something else. Paul Temple didn't just talk to Lyles. There were offshore account deposits, $1.2 million. We've got the bank records. This wasn't just sabotage, it was a buyout plan. Jacob's eyes narrowed. They were going to destroy Stormtech, then buy it for scraps. Exactly, Reggie said. You bring this in, it's game over. Jacob nodded. Send it to the court immediately. But also, be careful, Reggie. These people play dirty. Reggie chuckled grimly. So do I. As Jacob hung up, he spotted Vivien standing silently nearby. She'd heard most of the conversation. They paid him? She asked in disbelief. Jacob nodded. Bought him off to sell you out. But now we have the proof. All of it. Vivien's face hardened. Then let's end this. 90 minutes later, the courtroom was standing room only. Word had spread far beyond legal circles. This wasn't just a fraud case anymore, it was a war between truth and unchecked power. Judge Harris returned to the bench. Mr. Lane, he said solemnly, the court has reviewed the new evidence submitted. All communications, IP origins, and banking records have been authenticated. The burner phone's data has been fully verified. This court recognizes that substantial evidence suggests a conspiracy to frame Miss Storm. Marshall Kent rose one last time, face pale, voice tight. Your Honor, this is madness. He broke protocol. He was never authorized to. Enough, Harris said sharply. You and your office failed to verify critical details. Mr. Lane, without formal legal training, brought to light what an entire team of prosecutors overlooked or ignored. Vivien's hands trembled. Jacob simply bowed his head. We will hear final arguments tomorrow, Harris declared. But let it be known, truth is no respecter of title. And today this court was reminded of that by someone we all overlooked. He struck his gavel. The courtroom slowly emptied, but its walls still pulsed with the echo of Judge Harris's words. Truth is no respecter of title. Marshall Kent left like a shadow. His once dominant presence diminished, his shoulders stiff, his jaw clenched so tight it looked painful. His team followed him wordlessly, none daring to speak. Meanwhile, Jacob remained seated at the defense table, staring down at his binder. His hands were still, steady, but his heart thudded against his ribs. Even after the judge's declaration, he knew the game wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Vivien Storm turned toward him, her voice low and calm. I want to ask you something and I need the truth. Jacob looked up. Always. She studied him, no longer with skepticism but with something deeper. Respect. Maybe even trust. You had every reason to stay silent. No one would have blamed you. What made you take this risk? Jacob exhaled slowly. His gaze softened. Because when you've lost everything you stop being afraid of losing more. But more than that, because I saw what they were trying to do to you. I've been overlooked my whole life, Miss Storm. Judged by the uniform I wear. But so have you. You're just judged in a different way. People think powerful women must have cheated, lied, slept their way to the top. They want you to fail just to prove themselves right. Vivien's eyes glistened. She blinked, looking away then back. That's the first time anyone said that out loud. Jacob continued. They thought no one would notice if they buried you. But I did. And that was enough. Vivien paused for a long moment. You know, my father used to say something like that. When no one else stands up for you, God sends someone from the shadows. Someone unexpected. She gave a half smile. I never thought that someone would come holding a mop. Jacob chuckled softly. Neither did I. That night after the courthouse cleared out, Jacob didn't go straight home. He took the long subway back to Queens and stood outside his daughter Emma's school. She was in after-school math club, and the classroom lights still burned bright inside. When she finally came out, her backpack slung over her shoulder, her ponytail bouncing, she broke into a huge smile when she saw him. Daddy. Jacob knelt to hug her. The warmth of her tiny arms wrapped around his neck was the only thing that could silence the storm still whirling in his chest. You okay? She asked, tilting her head. He smiled. I am now. The next morning, court resumed under the weight of final arguments. Marshall Kent tried everything, cast doubt on chain of custody, questioned Jacob's credentials, even hinted at collusion between Jacob and Reggie Holmes. But it was too late. The evidence was too strong. The facts too clear. Jacob was called to deliver his final words. He stood slowly, binder in hand, and addressed the jury with the same steady voice he'd used on his first day cleaning floors. I'm not asking you to see me as a lawyer. I'm not one. I'm not asking you to believe in my qualifications. I don't have any fancy titles. But I am asking you to look at the truth. At the emails. The IP logs. The payments. The forgery. He glanced at Vivien. She nodded, subtle but firm. And I'm asking you to remember that justice doesn't wear a suit or a tie. Sometimes it wears gloves and pushes a mop. Sometimes it works in silence when no one is watching. That's all I have to say. He returned to his seat. The jury deliberated for only 2 hours. When they returned, every eye was on them. The tension was unbearable. The forewoman stood, her voice steady. We, the jury, find the defendant, Miss Vivien Storm, not guilty on all counts. Gasp. Applause. Tears. Vivien covered her mouth, overcome. She turned and embraced Jacob, fully, fiercely, not as a CEO clinging to survival, but as a woman overwhelmed by justice finally served. Even Judge Harris allowed a rare smile. Marshall Kent slumped in his seat. Crushed. Defeated. Martin Lyles, CEO of Alter Holdings, who had dared to show up for the verdict, rose and silently exited before anyone could confront him. But he would not escape the storm now barreling toward him. Multiple subpoenas were already in motion. Vivien looked up, her voice still trembling with emotion. Jacob, you didn't just defend me. You saved me. No, Jacob said gently. You saved yourself the moment you let someone else stand beside you. The next few days felt like a dream, or perhaps a slow-motion detonation. News outlets swarmed Stormtech's front gates. Headlines screamed across the internet. Janitor saves tech CEO in courtroom drama. Vivien Storm found not guilty, thanks to unlikely defender. The man with the mop who stopped a multi-million-dollar corporate scandal. Jacob Lane's photo, stoic, humble, standing beside a tearful Vivien, was everywhere. He had become an overnight folk hero, not for what he wore but for what he stood for. Yet amidst the cameras and applause, Jacob remained himself. He still walked his daughter to school every morning. Still nodded politely to neighbors who had never looked twice at him before. But something inside him had changed. He no longer felt invisible. One afternoon, Vivien called Jacob to her office. But this time it wasn't to discuss the fallout, it was personal. Her office looked different now. Lighter. The curtains pulled back. Sunlight poured in. And for the first time there was laughter, hers, echoing against the glass. Emma was there too, perched on the edge of Vivien's desk with a juice box in hand, chatting about her school science project. Jacob watched from the corner, half smiling, overwhelmed by the contrast between the storm they'd weathered and the calm they now stood in. Vivien turned toward him. I meant what I said in court, she began. Stormtech needs someone like you. Not in janitorial. In leadership. You understand people. You see what others don't. That's more valuable than any Ivy League degree. Jacob looked stunned. You're serious? Dead serious, she said, handing him a thick envelope. Executive legal advisor. Permanent position. Salary. Full benefits. And autonomy to run your own department with one focus: transparency and ethics. He opened the offer letter slowly, almost afraid it would vanish like a dream. But it didn't. He looked up, his voice low. You're giving me back my future. Vivien smiled. No. You took it back. I'm just making sure it has a seat at the table. Later that evening, after they dropped Emma off at a friend's house, Vivien invited Jacob to dinner. No lawyers, no press, no boardroom agendas. Just them. The restaurant was quiet, tucked in a hidden corner of Brooklyn. A small jazz trio played in the background. Candlelight flickered on their table. I'll be honest, Vivien said, cradling her wine glass. I never believed anyone would fight for me the way you did. Especially not someone I barely knew. Jacob looked at her, his eyes soft. That's the thing. You didn't know me, but I knew you. For 3 years I watched you lead. I saw your late nights, your loyalty to your people. You built something real here, and it mattered to people like me. I wasn't just defending you, I was defending what you represent. She swallowed hard. I wish I had noticed you sooner. Jacob smiled. Maybe it took the storm for us to actually see each other. Their hands touched across the table. Not romantically. Not yet. But with something far more powerful: understanding. In the following weeks, Storm Tech underwent a complete transformation. Vivien and Jacob held town halls. Not PR stunts, but real conversations. Employees, from entry-level to executive, were invited to speak freely about their concerns. And for the first time, people felt heard. Jacob was everywhere, listening, mediating, resolving. His calm presence and lived experience bridged gaps that years of corporate policy never could. One afternoon, a junior developer stopped Jacob in the hallway. Mr. Lane? Jacob turned. Thank you, the young man said. I was going to quit last month. Felt like no one saw me. Then you walked into that courtroom. You gave people like me hope. Jacob didn't know what to say. He simply nodded, eyes misting. But perhaps the greatest moment of healing came not from a court ruling or a board decision, but from Emma. Storm Tech had invited families for a community day, and Emma stood proudly in front of a chalkboard in the main conference room, leading a makeshift presentation about what she thought her dad did. My daddy isn't just a janitor, she said, chin up. He's a superhero with a notebook. He finds the truth and helps people who need it. And one day I'm going to help him. Vivien watched from the back of the room, her heart full. Later, as the sun dipped low, casting golden light across Stormtech's rooftop garden, she turned to Jacob and said quietly, You didn't just save a company. You saved me from forgetting who I was. Jacob replied with the gentlest truth of all. You were never lost, Vivien. Just waiting for someone to walk beside you. The warmth of early spring filled the air as Storm Tech slowly emerged, not just from scandal, but from rebirth. In the months that followed, it became more than just a comeback story. It became a case study in every major business journal. Headlines no longer focused on the trial, but on the transformation. On the janitor turned legal advisor who helped steer a company through the wreckage into a new era of integrity. Jacob Lane sat at his new desk one morning, a corner office now with clean lines and sunlight pouring through floor-to-ceiling windows. But he hadn't changed much. He still wore simple button-down shirts. Still brought Emma's packed lunch every day before school. And still greeted the janitorial staff by name, remembering who once overlooked him and who never did. A soft knock. Vivien entered, holding 2 cups of coffee. Peace offering, she said with a smile. You're always in here before sunrise. Jacob chuckled. Old habits die hard. She sat across from him, her eyes scanning the open files on his desk. You're reviewing ethics training modules again? Just making sure every voice is protected here, Jacob replied. No more blind spots. No more shadows. Vivien grew quiet. Then she reached into her purse and handed him a folded document. What's this? He opened it. It was a form. Storm Tech Foundation, Heart and Courage Initiative, a non-profit proposal to assist whistleblowers, low-income legal students and employees facing workplace injustice. And next to founder and chairperson were 2 names, Jacob Lane and Vivien Storm. Jacob looked up, stunned. You want to start a foundation? Not just want, Vivien said. Need to. You prove the system can work, but only if someone like you breaks through. We can help others do the same. A long pause. Then Jacob smiled. Let's do it. Months later they stood together again, on the very steps of the courthouse where it all began. But this time the scene was different. Hundreds of people gathered in folding chairs. A non-profit launch event. Journalists scribbled notes. Families clutched pamphlets. Jacob stood at the podium, Emma by his side, proudly clutching the mic stand. "Most people think heroes wear suits or capes," she said, her voice beaming. "But my daddy wears gloves and cleans floors. And he's still a hero." The audience erupted in applause. Then Jacob stepped up. His voice was steady but emotion pressed at the edges. "I never wanted fame. I just wanted the truth to matter again. That's why this foundation exists, for the people who feel invisible, who think their voice isn't enough. Let this be proof. It is. It always has been." He turned toward Vivien. She was already standing, tears in her eyes. As she joined him on stage, the crowd quieted again. Vivien's voice rang clear. "People say the world is run by power and privilege. But I say it's shaped by those who refuse to let power crush the truth." Jacob reminded me what courage looks like. He reminded all of us. And now we pass that light forward. That night, long after the speeches ended and the last chairs were folded, Jacob and Vivien walked the quiet sidewalk together. Emma skipped ahead, humming some tune she made up. Jacob glanced sideways at Vivien. "You ever think, maybe all of this was supposed to happen?" Vivien smiled, her hand brushing against his. "Sometimes, storms are the only way we see what really matters." He stopped walking, turning to her. "You know, Emma asked me yesterday if we're a family now." Vivien blinked. "What did you say?" "I told her, love doesn't always start with big things. Sometimes it starts with showing up. Standing beside someone when the world turns away." Vivien stepped closer. "Then let's keep showing up. Every day." Jacob nodded, and for the first time in years he felt not just hopeful, but home. Some stories aren't about wealth, fame, or titles. They're about quiet acts of courage that ripple outward and change lives. Jacob Lane didn't save a company by force. He did it with heart, with truth, and with the unwavering belief that everyone deserves to be seen. As Judge Harris said, "Never judge a person by their title. Judge them by their integrity." This story moved you? Help us echo it far and wide. Like, comment, and share this video. Subscribe to True Echo for more real, powerful stories that prove, when truth speaks, it echoes.